Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news for Monday, July 15th, 2024. I wanted to try something a little bit different here. So, instead of doing the whole Yu-Gi-Oh thing at the front, which is not what I'm promising, anyways, particularly since I am just in the middle of this middle emergency that may just go on forever, potentially, I just have less time, plus today is Monday, so there's a lot of good reasons to do an experiment here and just jump into the news as fast as possible. The only thing I could really even say about the accountability section or the catch-up section that I normally ramble and talk and warm up on while I'm playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Today is that I am playing Islands of Insight. I think I'm about 7 or 8 episodes, which would equate to closer to 10 hours into the game. And for a game that promises 10,000 plus puzzles, it delivers in 10,000 plus puzzles, and unfortunately that can get a little exhausting. Like, it's hard to complain about the game giving you exactly what it tells you is giving you, but there is certainly, I think, a pattern here in Island of Insight in that you get into certain areas, and then in those certain areas you do the same kind of puzzles over and over again, and that can be a little overwhelming, whereas there is a decent enough variety in the puzzles of Islands of Insight that it probably should just cycle through one, maybe two puzzles of the same same type, and then there should just be a lot more, whereas a lot of the excursion outer edges of the map really only have 2 or 3 types of puzzles in an area and drop several other types of puzzles, which makes it feel a little repetitive. There is also the point that the game still feels very much like they crammed an MMO engine into a puzzle game for no great reason, and so every time you have to walk around or look for the next puzzle, that can take a lot of time. Beyond that, I am considering adding gaming on Linux as a new news source, which I should just go ahead and bring that up anyways. See if I can do this without too many things happening. I know gaming on Linux as a Reddit subreddit and use that RSS feed from their Reddit subreddit, but inherently I could just take it as its own website, like I take my other news sources as their own websites, and get away from using any middlemen such as Twitter, Reddit, things like that. Now, scrolling down here on the news stories, some of these might be interesting bits of information. Some of these might get very redundant. For instance, a new Linux kernel version 6.10, while interesting to Linux people, is not perhaps that interesting to Linux gamers. And inherently, if I am going to consider gaming on Linux as a source, it is a step in the direction of being less neutral and focusing more on the Steam Deck and leaning towards putting some faith into an all Linux gaming future in the future, where you are simply people will eventually just abandon using either iOS or Windows to run games, although that is a far future away. Here we have like Heroes of Might and Magic 2 game engine, F Heroes 2 being released, version 1.1.1 being released, which that's a very old game. And I'm not sure if you really need a unique engine to run a single game. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Here's a Might Magic. Like, inherently, a lot of these old games were built on their own custom versions of engines, different engines, or their own engines alone. So emulating them might be more difficult than modern games, which are usually just going to be on Unreal or Unity. So in some distant future, there might be an emulator that runs all Unity games or all Unreal Engine games if for some reason they wouldn't work. OBS Studio version 30.2 is out, adding several new features that we'll talk about later. One of which is moving towards a hybrid MP4, which will include the feature to have chapters. And by having chapters built into the video as you're recording, yeah, there is a potential there where all of a sudden you could better label long streams like this and better break them up as clips after the fact. Last time I looked at it, I determined it would have been too dangerous using OBS to try and parallel create clips and a full live stream at the same time. Something would crash, or you would lose all the footage. It would overtax your GPU to do it that way, or more than likely it would. But if all of a sudden with this newest version I can just put chapters into the hybrid MP4 file, then I could probably just run a script and automate the whole process to break up the videos into shorts, the news announcements and headlines into shorts, which that might be very interesting. Speaking of my YouTube channel somewhat, I'm also up to 900 subscribers, so 100 more subscribers and I'll be at the 1,000 subscriber threshold. That being said, I would still need about 3 times as much watch time or millions of short views to actually get into the YouTube Partner Program. And even if I did enter the YouTube Partner Program at such a low level, there's no real thought that any actual money would come in. I would be getting maybe $10-20 a month. Even if at best I would think maybe $100 a month, not a livable wage. Whereas for me, thinking all the bills, $1,200 to $2,000 a month would be much more of a reasonable living wage, particularly on YouTube where the income is not guaranteed. Some of these articles are interesting, but some of these articles might also just overall drag the entire stream to be even longer, which maybe we don't really need that. FlatHub has grown to over 2 billion downloads being recorded, FlatHub being the main distributor server for Flatpaks, sandboxed applications used on things like the Steam Deck. Yeah. Unfortunately, even though I am making progress on making more footage, my macro still is broken. Still doesn't really work great. I could probably schedule videos without that being an issue, but it does certainly highlight that I'm not even really trying to do that, and I think a lot of the footage that is airing right now might very well be the last bit of footage that I have scheduled, which is crazy because I have plenty of footage that has been uploaded, it just hasn't been scheduled. And so I need to spend some extra time doing that. And today might be a good day after today's stream to do that, since I could use a little bit of a break from Islands of Insight. So if we're going to experiment here with going through the news, we'll go in as best as I can the order I normally would go. We can see Banana on SteamDB with the concurrent players is back up to a higher number. Once Human seems to have launched in the 7th position. Apex Legends is still getting played quite a bit, despite it being increasingly disliked and negatively reviewed. In an interview, the Larian Studios, I believe it was CEO, talked about how he would like to make a Fallout game, but almost certainly wouldn't be allowed to make a Fallout game, but certainly throws that out the window as far as you shout it into the void and maybe it will happen. That's actually the saying I meant to use. Throws it out the window means something different. Inherently, Larian Studios could make a game like Fallout and just not call it Fallout, but I suspect it would play a lot like Baldur's Gate 3 in that it would be more of a tabletop Dungeons and Dragons style role-playing game and less of what I think Fallout these days really should be, which is mostly just a comedic run and gun shooter with very light, silly perks, less grinding, and good story, but story that leans on a comedic aspect. Now, this is the point where I haven't figured it out in my head as far as what I would do if I was going to do a this one's reaching pretty high numbers for a new release. If I was going to do a longer catch-up section, like, would I just stay on this page and maybe scroll up and down? Or would I, as I continue to just talk, click down the list? There is potentially a way here in which I could add some JavaScript and have it scroll down slowly in a kind of a smooth scroll like the tickers at the top do, although the tickers at the top are actually a program pulling the information from RSS feeds. But yeah, I don't know where I really would go there. What I don't think I would want to do is sit on my chart here, where this chart is helpful. It is not visually stimulating enough or well designed enough for people to sit on it and talk for a long time. We can see Baldur's Gate 3 is bumping back up, and then Stardew Valley's kind of going downward. Once Human skyrocketing up, and Apex Legends going downward. Naraka Blade Point going downward, whereas Elden Ring going upward. So this is a unique week in that we're seeing quite a few things get surpassed by other things, whereas generally speaking, there's a lot of games that always stay just about in the same relative position to the games around them. Yeah. You would kind of expect more crisscrossing if gamers swapped what games they were playing, but that's not really how it mostly goes. I think the people playing Counter-Strike 2 are just the people playing Counter-Strike 2, and they don't play anything else. And that is a major part of the skewed nature of the top of these concurrent player lists, is that all we're seeing is that there's a very large group of games that either allow bots or have a consistent loyal player base. It would be perhaps better information if I could get some kind of Nielsen-like data and sample what a random sampling of 10,000 players on Steam are playing at any time. The same 10,000 players. But that might not be that helpful either. It may be just the case that numbers don't matter and data doesn't matter as far as video gaming goes, as it may be just more of an art to suss out what is the general vibe and feel. And for the most part, that in the past has always been created mostly by mainstream video game journalism, in that whatever Giant Bomb is talking about, whatever Kotaku is talking about, whatever r/gaming is talking about, all of that is such a I lost my train of thought. Yeah. The general vibe of who's talking about what games and who's playing which games has been created by mainstream video game journalism for so long that it has created a somewhat false feeling that as far as what the gaming community actually is, if there is even really a gaming community, and what they're actually interested in. So going back to numbers might be the only way to really get down to the truth. Here we have an article from GameDeveloper.com saying that Steam has simplified its social media linking after an aggressive API updates. Valve is still partially referring to X's Twitter. So somehow in, I guess, the Steam overlay, you can share to Discord, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, X, Twitter, and growing platforms such as TikTok, Be Real, I'm not sure what that one even is, Mastodon, which is a federated one, Threads, Blue Sky, which was made from the same person I think that created Twitter originally, and co-host. No, actually, if I read this whole sentence, none of those have any official presence, which in fairness, I'm not sure any gamers really want to share it to any of these. Inherently, it feels to me like Valve is making small steps to having everything be more internal anyways, and it always has kind of wanted things to be internal. So yeah, this may very well just be a case of Valve changing its API because they wanted to, more than any specific policy. And honestly, I don't think it's going to affect gamers too much. This might be small steps to also align their beta recording app, which they put out an update maybe a week or two ago, to improve that a little bit. They may very well have this thought that recording via the Steam client is the main focus, and so any social media site such as TikTok, which really wouldn't let you upload a link to a long form video, shouldn't be focused on. Video Games Chronicle has a feature where they are talking about Slitterhead and saying that it's a crazy action horror game, and from the looks of these screenshots It does very much look like a crazy action horror game. It's reminiscent of some of the more monstrous that you would have seen, probably inspired by like early animes like Devilman, but there are some more recent examples there. Just some really weird monsters. That is one of the great things from a United Statesian looking into Japan, is that they don't really have a huge reverence for any fiction as far as monsters go, and the concept of just monsters, yokai, things like that are wild and very varied in the stories that have been told for a long time, and they have certainly evolved. For instance, the slit mouth woman is almost certainly a totally made up story of very recent decades, told by Japanese kids, I imagine, to each other and evolving in each telling, much like Slender Man in the West was told by kids and evolved. Whereas we haven't really, until fairly recently, been willing to embrace things like Slender Man in more traditional art forms. Before that, it was very much just a case of vampire, Frankenstein, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Mummy, things like that. Very old traditional movies that the Universal Studios made and talked about. And the Disneyfication of monsters to make them mostly cute looking probably also hurt the weirdness level of how monsters are depicted in the West. For instance, like Ursula in The Little Mermaid probably could have been drawn as a much more horrific looking character if it wasn't a Disney movie. Parasite would be a much more recent anime that would have inspired these kinds of monsters. But we really haven't seen a lot of this in video games, Resident Evil 4 perhaps being a major exception. I'd say the Japanese probably have more of a love and very different looking, like beetles and insects in their area too, which might change the appearance of how monsters are depicted. So yeah, the grossness is here. Well, it'll be a while till we see actual gameplay in trailers. Well, there is a trailer here if we wanted to watch it. Did I ever fix videos playing, or are they still not loading? Yep. I'd say there's been more movies and TV shows with monsters. And Slitherhead has the monsters, yes, but it also has a gameplay mechanic like a game called Geist, where you jump between different bodies and control different bodies. There might be even a little bit of influence from like Gantz as a manga / anime series, in that there was a bunch of aliens pretending to be human in Gantz, and they were being hunted by humans. Yeah, you see a lot of variety of monsters here. The fact that this is set in what looks like a more modern times and urban environment perhaps shows a hint that the Japanese are getting more of a taste of wanting to not have everything set in fantasy worlds. But it may just be a case that horror in urban modern times makes sense, whereas fantasy doesn't. A Crash Bandicoot artist claims that a 5th game was cancelled. Which, okay. Inherently, you finish a game like Crash Bandicoot 4. You have a 4th game in a series. Obviously, there's going to be that in that same meeting talk of a Crash Bandicoot 5. And somewhere there could be a file, digital or real, of ideas for the next game. And theoretically, that could be canceled. You could call that being canceled. Or it could range all the way the other direction to the point where the game was completely finished and completely made and it still got canceled. And in the end of the day, it kind of doesn't matter either way. Because if a game's canceled, the game's canceled. Unless somebody's going to hack and leak what content was actually released to the point where fans could fix it and mod it so it would be playable, it really shouldn't matter to a gamer. Gamers should really only care about what they can play and not worry about what they can't. And we have a plethora of games anyways. Every time there's a Steam sale, everyone comes together to agree that they have way more games in their Steam library than time they have to actually play all of those games. So yeah, every time we hear one of these stories, I feel like it's just kind of pointless news. Apparently the first BioShock 4 images have reportedly appeared online, although notably they are showing me a screenshot here of what I believe would be BioShock 1, but maybe BioShock 2, which we've already heard through other rumors that BioShock 4 is going to be set in a city in Antarctica, and so it really should not look anything like Rapture does. And inherently, Rapture had this 1960s, 1970s feel to its design and its architectural design. One would assume a very different feeling would come about in BioShock 4. Columbia in BioShock 3 also had a very different architectural design in the way it looked. So, yeah. If this is supposed to be the picture, let's click on it and see what this even does. This is an imager link. If this is supposed to be BioShock, well, this feels nothing like BioShock to me. Ricochet shotgun with bullets, different kinds of attacks that seem to be fairly time focused, a health bar and some kind of stamina bar, and then a picture of what looks like just some kind of maybe warming station beacon. Yeah, that definitely feels like that could be anything. Yep. So yeah, I kind of hope that that is not what BioShock 4 looks like, because that does not feel in any way like BioShock, in that I'm not seeing any enemies, I'm not seeing any people, I'm not seeing any places to jump around as far as higher sections, nor am I feeling enclosed and trapped like I would in Rapture. It is kind of a very different experience. Columbia in BioShock 3 is a much more open area where you can jump around and skyhook around to different locations, whereas Rapture has you more trapped in areas, but still has kind of circular patterns where you can run around in circles and get behind enemies. This has much more of a feel because you see the skybox and because you see this gun, like you may just see all enemies in a far distance and shoot them at a far distance. That feels much more like just a regular shooter. And I would also say that a health bar in all of this is inherently doing the wrong thing as far as how the BioShock series was committed. They went out of their way to not have a health bar and instead just have the screen glow red when you take a lot of damage. They went out of their way to have the player's hand light up in different colors based on what spell he's about to activate, so there wasn't a user interface. And they went out of their way to have the guns themselves have a gauge on them to say how many bullets there are in them, to not have a heads-up interface. So if this is a screenshot of BioShock 4, they are making BioShock 4 extremely generic and definitely not even really going in the tradition of what BioShock has been in the past. Moving on. Refused classification highlights things that have been censored in Australia. For instance, LA Noire seems to be showing that it has been banned under the automated tools, although the banning by the automated tools pretty much just always leads to a manual rating classification. It was M15 Plus in 2011 and 2017 when it was released. I do think in LA Noire there probably was a point where there was a dead female body and you were inspecting it and seeing maybe toplessness, maybe even bottomlessness. Maybe I'm dreaming that up. There's also, although inherently, I bet the Australian government doesn't care one bit about that. I bet what they care about is the fact that there is a major plot point throughout many missions where you are following morphine users. And this would have been in a time that LA Noire set in which morphine was handed out and distributed by the US military as a medicine, and then the military morphine is going missing in the story, so there's severe amounts of implied drug use, which Australia is very much against that. They also, I believe, have the classification of the new Zelda game. Did they take that down? Maybe they retweeted somebody else's case. Although I imagine the classification of the new Zelda game by the Australian government is probably fairly trivial, in that I imagine the new Zelda game where you actually play as Zelda is going to get a fairly low rating and be approved. Disney has reportedly become the victim of a 1 terabyte data breach. 1 terabyte of data can really be a ton of data, and that most data of real value is not going to be music or video. So 1 terabyte of text could be quite a lot. On the other hand, there is also a case where a lot of hacker groups claim to hack people when they barely hack them, or the information they've gotten is very useless, or they've gotten considerably less than the amount of data that they're claiming. Hacker groups habitually have to big up themselves to try to get new hackers to join their groups. And so a lot of it is very much a hype train. Tens of thousands of files from the Disney's internal Slack. The bigger part about this is related to Disney projects, and so hearing Disney has been hacked and that they had a terabyte worth of data related to new projects actually makes me feel better about Disney, because if you told me that Disney had been hacked and they didn't have even a terabyte of new projects, and that they were just not really planning on making anything new, or didn't really have any idea about what they were going to do in the future, that would be a lot worse. I also heard a rumor, and I have to just say this is a rumor at this point, that Cartoon Network may have gone bankrupt. So that'd be very weird, certainly, if it went into like a full Chapter 7 shutdown, and then all of a sudden the cable channel Cartoon Network disappears. I imagine if Cartoon Network is bankrupt, it's doing a Chapter 11 restructuring thing, and that there would always be somebody that would own Cartoon Network, and even if they're just going to re-air the exact same old cartoons over and over again, never make anything new. Almost 10,000 channels in the Slack. Slack is mostly just a communication thing, though. So yeah, I don't know how much you really are going to get there. You may just have 2 people talking ideas, when Bob Iger, being in charge of Disney again, may have never really approved any of those ideas in the first place. And certainly there are things that parts of Disney and subsidiaries of Disney work on in the background forever, and it's just not really going to matter or show. What would be great news to my ears is if there was, in this data breach, a long list of, we're going to remake a lot of the old animated movies, we're going to re-release all the old movies. There is a danger that physical media is dying and just going to go away completely. So I don't know if it wouldn't be time for a new Blu-ray UHD standard to be made, not involving Sony as much this time. This might be the point where Microsoft could step in and they could make an HD DVD new standard of Blu-ray, if they could physically make a new standard, which that's the big if, is can you squeeze more layers onto the discs to make them significantly larger enough, and can you make it cheap enough to justify those kinds of discs being sold. Meanwhile, in direct contrast, Redbox has gone out of business, so if you can get to a Redbox and rent a bunch of movies, odds are you're never going to have to return them, although in fairness they may still demand in the bankruptcy proceedings that everybody return all of their rented Redbox movies. I imagine the Redbox machines don't work anymore, and so there probably will be some clearance sales of movies, but they'll be terrible movies anyways. inherently, I'm even though I don't want to see the death of physical media, there is a considerably smaller number of types of videos I actually want to own physically. I want to own video games physically because, first and foremost, because they are very big and require installs. So it just doesn't make any sense at all to download and then have to have hard drives that will break and replace hard drives, which is not like they're really making hard drives bigger in size. But then I also want some of the classic movies that I actually would want to go back and watch on my shelves. But there's actually very few of those that I would want. And for the most part, I probably could get away with just bouncing around different streaming services to watch movies, classic movies, whenever they are available, and let them disappear and reappear, unless we hit a point where streaming services start to just drop certain movies always. For a great example of that is, I've never watched Eraserhead. I'd like to watch Eraserhead. The fancy way to do that would be to buy the Criterion collection of Eraserhead and watch it that way. The non-fancy way to do that is probably to just find it on a streaming service. Very possibly just find it on YouTube. But then there is always the anime aspect, whereas anime in particular has always been in this weird situation where it is a very niche type of entertainment, and there are many other niches that I'm just not as interested in, and it has always been particularly rare anime because it has been coming from Japan and then getting dubbed into English by a very small number of companies. There really has only been 3 or 4 companies at any one time that was dubbing anime and releasing anime in the West. So yeah, that on top of the fact that anime was particularly always designed to be sold and put on shelves with box sets and very nice art, whereas almost all other movies that are standalone or even TV series don't have nice box set art anymore. So it's kind of pointless to put it on the shelf when it's just going to look ugly. But yeah, I've digressed here, but yeah, Microsoft certainly could come out with a new HD DVD, something that held 2 or 3 times as much as the biggest 125 gigabyte UHD disc, and they could make an Xbox be a player for that, and then boost up their console sales somewhat that way for that niche audience. Yeah, I still need to get a 4K upscaling UHD player, although I don't think I'm going to get it starting tomorrow. In about 12 hours Prime Day starts. I don't think I'm going to end up buying that though. I think I'm still very much leaning to buying a top of the line robot mopping vacuum, which will blow the budget at $700 by itself, and it'll be a stretch to get even a few other things if they go on lightning deal sales. It's still important to point out that Prime Day is mostly just sales that you could have gotten at other times throughout the year. It isn't giving you that much of extra savings. It's just giving you a smaller window of time to think about buying things, which works for people certainly if they are kind of too tempted by advertisement and don't want to just follow something like slickdeals.net 365 days a year. But yeah, I'm not anticipating too much that I can really afford. There's quite a few things I do want to buy, but I'm gonna have to prioritize and be practical. So yeah, I've digressed here quite a bit from Disney. Inherently, I'd like Disney just to be the Disney of several decades ago. Honestly, I'd like Disney to be the Disney of its early inception, a animation studio that happened to have eventually happened to have a Disney World and Disneyland theme parks, but they've long since stopped being that, and they've become an acquisition studio that has acquired the likes of Marvel, which they just announced Captain America, a new Captain America starring the new Captain America actor who was I think the Black Falcon before that. So we'll see how many people are interested in that. Not that many. It got announced and it didn't really lead to any real discussion that I saw. Although in fairness, today is July 15th and a lot has happened in the last day with a seemingly failed attempted presidential candidate assassination, which I'm not going to talk about. Like, has nothing to do with video games. Yeah. Weirdly, even amongst the different candidates, there hasn't been any real focus that either one of them would do anything about video games. They've got bigger targets set in their sights as far as what they would want to do in their next presidential terms. So video games might be fairly unscathed, regardless of who was in power after the next election. Although I would have some theories as to who would be better for gaming. I will keep them to myself. Let's move on with the news. So here's OBS talking about OBS Studio 3. Version 30.2. So exciting new features including the Twitch enhanced broadcasting. This is where you can have two video streams streaming at the same time. They've introduced a new theme system, which is a cool idea. They've introduced zero copy hardware encoding on hardware on Linux, which that probably will reduce the amount of wear and tear on whatever scratch disk you're using on Linux. And then the new hybrid MP4 format for crash resiliency, so if it crashes, the videos won't be corrupted, which has always been a problem. That's why in earlier versions it was very much the case where you should record things as MKVs and then have it automatically remux it to an MP4. You're only really remuxing it to an MP4 because YouTube prefers MP4s. And then it also adds compatibility and long-awaited support for chapter markers. And so with version 30.2 adding support for chapter markers allows me, it's the gun at the start of a race, to make my macros work with the chapter markers so that I can make YouTube shorts and have an advantage that other people who can't figure out, which will be a lot of people, how to automate that. In the same way I have an advantage that I have macros automatically making YouTube shorts around the games that come out on Steam. Just by being able to make so many more shorts, I can flood the market with what is effectively cheap, low effort content, but enough content to get me views, and it certainly is working. It's getting me subscribers, it's getting me views on videos I would prefer would lead into people watching my pre-recorded footage, and that's not really happening. I suppose it's also important to point out that if you're updating OBS, you need to update your GPU drivers too, because OBS hooks into NVIDIA GPU drivers to record the footage, and they have to have a code signing certificate line up for that. So this Twitch help with multiple encodes we'll look at later. Let's see. Seems like they might have for a multi-track video you can only do stereo and mono, or mono, not and some of these features require certain levels of graphics cards, which shouldn't be a big deal. Relatively recent, anything in the GTX 900 series is anything from the past 5 years basically. Let's see. So this sends extra data to Twitch as far as OBS version and your resolution, frame rate, and the channels and tracks. Also CPU information, GPU information, memory information, and OS information. All of that would be more than enough to identify you uniquely, identify your hardware uniquely, but it kind of doesn't matter if you're sending that to Twitch because you're already signed into a Twitch account, so they should already know who you are anyways. Maximum video tracks, maximum streaming. They've also added support for enhanced RTMP, FLV, multi-track audio and video, which this is a step in the direction, I think, to stream to perhaps YouTube with multi-track if YouTube ever supports it. It is very much the chicken and the egg situation here, where OBS is adding features before YouTube actually supports them, and the hope is that YouTube would actually support the new features, in my case as a YouTuber mostly. This is a beta for Hybrid MP4. So you can insert chapter markers via a hotkey or in the advanced programmable interface. These markers are supported by most players and editing software such as DaVinci Resolve. So, yep. I would have to double check to see if FFmpeg can recognize the chapters. More than likely it can, because I would have to tell FFmpeg to then take my entire video and start chopping it up in between certain markers into individual videos, which wouldn't be that hard. Linux support for the NVEC encoder, which is less processing power, smaller videos, I believe. And then several Linux support for better shared texture support. And then this whole theme system sounds interesting, although I didn't even know OBS had themes in the first place. And honestly, I don't know if you really need to change OBS. It'd be nice if you could change it, but it should be a very low priority. And then there's a long list of features that have been changed and bug fixes. So for me, what I should do, since I'd like to try these and experiment with these, is I either need to pull the trigger after finishing recording Islands of Insight because I don't want to change anything in the middle of recording a specific game. If I want to be ambitious, I would install 30.2. But if I want to be cautious, what I would do is I would scroll down here into the last known good minor number change. So not the release candidates, not the betas. You scroll way down here. Should be 2 more releases. That was beta 1. I should see and stay at version 30.1.2. That way, this release, which was released April 5th, we know has been fairly good to the point where they didn't need to make any more tweaks and patches, which the 0.2 here indicates that something needed to be fixed and it was patched. Well, the 0.2 in the second middle spot here on the later releases indicates new features have changed, been added, but not a significant enough of new features to change it to 31, which arguably maybe it should have been 31. That is always a tough call. So anyways, that's the update for OBS, which is arguably not video game related. Oh, so it wasn't the Australian board that had the rating for The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, the new Zelda game where you play as Zelda. It is the American, United States ESRB that has the rating, which E10 plus. No big surprise there. Coming out for the Nintendo Switch apparently, which I kind of would, I guess maybe it is going to be a cross-platform game. It kind of makes some sense there. Yeah, it probably wouldn't be a system seller anyways, if they had made it exclusive to the next Nintendo console. Ubisoft says that it's actively working on the Driver franchise, but the planned live-action series has hit a road bump. Let's see. This isn't video game. No, this is video game related. I kind of thought I might use this as, you know, just straight up steal this probably not copyrightable image, since it's a parody on a anti-piracy ad that from the UK, where yeah, you wouldn't steal a car, so pirating, I think it was music in the original ad, is the same as stealing a car, which inherently this ad in the UK in its original form never made any sense at all, because they are very much making a false equivalence, assuming that the person watching wouldn't steal a car, whereas I think a lot of people might steal a car depending on the situation and their desperation and need. Stealing a car is taking something physical that is inherently depriving the original owner of that car of the use of the car. Copying music, on the other hand, or making a copy of a floppy disk, is inherently not depriving the original owner of that floppy disk or that cassette tape the use of it. Now, in both cases where the parallel probably is the same, is that the manufacturer of a car is losing a potential opportunity that you would have bought a car had you not stolen it, which in that scenario is never really true. Like, nobody that can afford to buy a car is going to steal a car unless they're just crazy. And the same exact argument is made that you're potentially depriving the production company and the publisher of a cassette tape a sale if you're copying it, which that too is probably not true, because if you're going through the effort to copy a cassette, you probably don't have the money or desire to ever actually buy a um, to originally have just bought the cassette. Particularly in the case of cassettes, buying the cassette would have given you a higher quality audio experience anyways than copying it, because you do lose some quality in making copies of copies. There's also an aspect here that we can't really argue much about whether or not car manufacturers or music publishing companies are making as much money as they potentially could in a theoretical world where piracy didn't exist, when there are so many people that are impoverished and homeless and are getting massive amounts of debt from pretty much forced needs of education just to maintain jobs and get jobs, forced needs of paying for health care, even in the UK where it is socialized medicine, you're still paying something for health care, and I don't think they pay for dentistry in the UK's system, and you're still paying taxes for the healthcare anyways. And I've been dealing with healthcare recently, and I won't go into too much details here because of just privacy concerns, but in the United States, I definitely would trade the horrible United States healthcare system for a horrible Canadian or UK based healthcare system that is just run by the government and socialized. Because for one specific fact, even if you aren't getting any better care, which you probably would, but let's just say it was the exact same amount of care, there is at least a level of accountability in the socialized medicine systems, in that that doctors and nurses have to actually do things and have to actually document that they've done things, and it isn't just some insurance company like it is in the United States that can reject needed treatments or reject paying for things. And it isn't a case where the entire healthcare system in the United States has started to evolve to a system where you will have case managers at hospital just try to pass the buck over to charities, which the charities inherently have no accountability at all. So instead of the hospital doing what they should be doing, that they will just try and discharge you, and then they'll say, well, you could call this charity and this charity. One of them in particular I will name out loud is that Meals on Wheels in the United States are run by individual chapters, and I have tried to deal with Meals on Wheels multiple times in the area I live in, and they have rejected me every single time. They don't have any accountability. They don't have to help anybody if they don't want to. These charities can be run incredibly inefficiently. They can get donations, and they can put up to 90% of all of the donations they get to just paying the salary of the people that run the charities in a legal way. And at the very least, under a socialized medicine, you won't have the case where a hospital can bill. I saw somewhere that a hospital was billing $17,000 a day to a healthcare insurance just to rent out the room in a hospital room. Yeah. There is no other place in the United States where paying $17,000 for a tiny little hospital room is in any way logical. And then the hospitals can bill that much, and if they get paid only 10% of that from the health insurance companies, they are more than happy to get even 10% of $17,000 a day. And then all of that healthcare insurance pays out, all the money they pay out inherently comes out of the premiums and other services that should be getting done that are getting rejected by the healthcare insurance companies. Yeah, it makes no sense for a capitalist system to be involved in healthcare at all. It totally should be a government-run socialist system. This is just a service that is for its citizens to keep the citizens healthy and happy so they don't revolt and so they could join the military if the country needs them to. That's the point of a healthcare system. There. Now, keep them healthy, happy, keep them working for the rest of the capitalist system, I suppose. But yeah. That too has nothing to do with video games, but I wish every single politician had to experience what it was like to have private insurance and not have their special government insurance that is a different experience. Of course, they would also have to be fairly broke because being able to pay out of pocket for a lot of extra services in healthcare gives a very different experience too. Anyways, back to video games. You wouldn't not credit everyone that worked on a game in any capacity is a little too wordy as a headline, but it definitely highlights the growing rhetoric we're hearing as far as gamers don't appreciate miscrediting or not crediting people, and we are taking game companies more and more to task when they do that. Particularly, Nintendo needs to be named out for habitually not crediting or miscrediting people. The summer sale is over, obviously, but they have announced a Fighting Games Fest is coming. So that'll be the next big thing. I guess the sales for the LCD versions of the Steam Deck have gone away, so I guess now would not be a good time to buy a Steam Deck unless you just wanted it. Unfortunately, the Amazon Prime sale is not going to give you any major discount from Steam Decks. You can find some Steam Decks being sold by third parties on Amazon. I wouldn't inherently trust those companies to buy a Steam Deck from. It would just make more sense to buy it from Valve directly. And you can buy Steam gift cards, but there's likely going to be a markup on the Steam gift cards, in that you can't buy like $100 of Steam credit for $100. Probably will be somewhere around $105, $115. And generally speaking, even if you have an Amazon Prime store card or a cashback credit card, they never cover gift cards with those extra discounts. So yeah, Steam Deck accessories might be available on Amazon, docks that would work with the Steam Deck, although it would make a lot of sense to buy just the official Steam Deck dock. That makes just for compatibility reasons. But yeah, internal NVMe storage cards might make sense if you wanted to upgrade your Steam Deck, but even that depends on how much you have filled up your Steam Deck. Micro SDs are the one thing that will be on sale during Prime Day, and yeah, I'm gonna see if I can get a 1.5 terabyte micro SD for a decent discount, and hope it actually works in my very old tablet, which my tablet, even though I spilled an entire glass of water on it, is still working. this is funny that they're saying Elder Scrolls Online is like Islands of Insight, which, yeah, I don't think it is. And weirdly, Myst is much closer to Islands of Insight. Although the thing I would say about Myst is Myst has like one puzzle that's unique for each area, whereas Islands of Insight takes it to a whole new scale and creates lots and lots of puzzles. I saw a YouTuber talking about Fable Anniversary, which is, I guess the hype is growing for the next Fable game. There is a question though about whether Fable 2 and 3 are worth playing. And then my macro's still broken, so all of these little interstitial tabs, I don't know why they specifically open up in one place and then so many other things open up in another place. It just kind of jumps around. Like everything should be opening up in the last window that I opened the latest, and yet a significant number of the tabs I open are on the first window, but not all of them. So there's some weird inconsistency. I still haven't fixed the fault list cleanup, which, okay. And then this is the Komatsu news articles, although in fairness, since it's been over the weekend, I'm not sure how many news stories there really even are. See, this Castaway launching August 16th for all consoles and PC was a couple days ago. So this game and this game and this game and this game may be the entire news from Komatsu. And then Call of Duty Black Ops 6 multiplayer beta dates have been confirmed in August and September. Let's see, August 30th until September 4th. And I can hear my stomach growling, so this is a probably good place to take a bit of a break. We'll show that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a new XYZ cup, and then I'll pause the recording and take a break, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So, yeah. As far as, like, the news goes, it may just be all over the place, and I may have just missed some of it. Like, and certainly this podcast giveaway nonsense from Video Games Chronicle is not really news. So, we'll get rid of that. That was something else. I feel like we had already talked about this one, Steam simplifying social media, linking over aggressive API changes. This is one article that I had opened up to talk about as a major news story, and so it's being opened for GameDeveloper.com, I guess, a second time. And I guess this is kind of older news as far as the first Descendant launching with 10 million players in its first week. And that will clean up the right side of all my tabs. So let's go to the left side. But yeah, inherently, this does point out and seem like there are no Komatsu articles at all today. And that doesn't make any sense. Like, I still don't know why the macro's not working. Because when I run it myself, it does work. So why is it when it's run amongst a larger collection of macros, there's something happening at the beginning or the end of the section where Komatsu is supposed to open its tabs open that is causing something weird to happen. But anyways, for Video Games Chronicle, EA Sports FC 25 Ultimate Edition cover has been released, revealing a full reveal coming this week. Which, This is an odd cover art, if this is supposed to be the cover art for a soccer game, football game. What? This is a video. Yeah. It's gonna premiere in 43 hours. It's just oddly zoomed out to show a lot of stuff when it feels like it would make a lot more sense to maybe cut the statue in half, or you move this statue right in front of this guy. This feels like a photo shoot that was just rushed, in the sense that they may have had everybody only for a certain amount of time, but I could also see a case where this is a composite shoot and there was just a time in which one person showed up to this set, took a picture, then another person showed up at a different time, another person at a different time, another person, and then they just composited it in. But regardless of whether it's a composite shot or not, you could have put this trophy in front of these legs here. You could then also have just framed it, so you're just getting the edge of trophies, the edge of heads. And I imagine maybe what they've done here is they've taken a picture to be particularly wide for some kind of collector's edition box art, and then the actual cover for the disc, which is more of a portrait, will just crop all of that. It's a very busy picture regardless, though. Just a lot of stuff going on here. And since I don't know anything about soccer, I couldn't tell you which of these trophies were which, or what value there is in these trophies, nor can I tell you any of these people, who any of these people are. It does seem like they've gone out of their way to add a female soccer player in the picture, which that has been a recent controversy discussion, in that the FIFA leagues in particular, I think it was, were not paying the female soccer players anywhere close to what the male soccer players were getting paid. Although the controversial argument against the equal pay was that the fandom was not going to watch female soccer players play as much as the male soccer players were being watched, which I'm not sure how true that counter argument was. And that's frankly more discussion than I'm really equipped to have as far as soccer games, so let's move on. Mortal Kombat 1 DLC character Takeda stars in a new gameplay trailer, which, yeah. There was an article posted on Reddit talking about how games have become creatively bankrupt at this point, in that you're having games like Pac-Man have crossovers with Gundam, you're having Homelander show up in Mortal Kombat 1, you're having some real weird crossovers that just don't feel appropriate or like they make sense. And yeah, particularly in the case of Mortal Kombat 1, I would say if the idea here is for a fresh reboot to revitalize the series and get a potential whole new audience to be willing to jump into it, it's not putting your best feet forward to then admit by having DLC that you cannot creatively create a character like Homelander, where Homelander is just a parody on Superman. It would be very easy to have a character like Homelander be your own unique character. Yeah. I would say Sonya Blade and Jax already are in that range of being rah American. So you could certainly see a new character like them that was much more of a Superman type, patriotic type character. Although labeling as Homelander as patriotic is not the right label. Yeah, but in direct contrast to everything I just said, watching this trailer, he's not particularly interesting. He looks like he's just another ninja character in a game that already has quite a few ninja characters. And honestly, at this point, I think the fatalities and all that nonsense that is in Mortal Kombat have just been so incredibly played out that there is an argument to flip the script and just release a Mortal Kombat game with no fatalities, with way less blood, way less violence. Because going that direction, yeah, here's Homelander, Omni-Man, Peacekeeper, just characters that just don't really matter and aren't going to be characters that play anything to the story, which the story is incredibly weak in Mortal Kombat as a series already, as a fighting game. Modern Warfare 3 and Warzone Season 5 also are featuring a WWE crossover. Man, it's like the news stories are lined up perfectly in this case. Right. Yeah, again, they just don't care anymore. Now, in fairness, I guess, there have been, when you look at like more Eastern, Asian, Korean, Chinese games, mobile games in particular, there has been a fairly high level of willingness to just have crossovers with almost anything, and it hasn't really hurt them. It's just been kind of silly and ridiculous. The mobile game that's now shut down that I used to play, Destiny Child, had a crossover with Kikomi Friends, I believe is the name of the anime, where it's these childlike anthropomorphic animal characters in some kind of post-apocalypse where humans are no longer around. Very much felt more like it was a kids type anime, Kikomi Friends. Very weird for that to then have a crossover with Destiny Child, which was a lewd, mature, adult gacha game where every other character has significant amounts of cleavage and skin showing in general. Just didn't really make a lot of sense for those characters to be added. And the Kikomi Friend characters that were added were not added in different types of outfits where they were particularly showing skin or being lewd, so it didn't really match the theme. Weirdly, Destiny Child also earlier had two crossovers with Hatsune Miku, again not really putting her in very lewd outfits. Not every outfit in Destiny Child was lewd, but that was definitely the lean to it. And Shift Up made Destiny Child, and they made Stellar Blade, so the level of lewdness in Stellar Blade is probably a little less than what was in Destiny Child, just by a little. Neither one of them are pure on nudity, which is, and more recently I unlocked one character in the mobile game I am now playing called Memento Mori, which really don't feel like it is an adult game at all. It's a mature game more for its dark themes, in that the characters you collect all pretty much seem like they suffer from depression or abuse or something like that in their life as they tell you their stories, and then you tend to save them from that depression or abuse. But But there is like one character that is effectively topless, although they have bows covering their nipples, in Memento Mori, called Bella, and it stands out as being a little too far for the game. And they are also doing a summer event where 2 of the characters are in 2-piece swimsuits, which isn't really that big of a deal, though that's pretty acceptable. And then the actual adult game, I'm playing Tinkafuma on my phone, which is, I'm still wasting a lot of time playing Tinkafuma, Memento Mori. I'm still playing the New York Times games with Wordle, and that's frustrating to do all those word games. I should uninstall that. Tinkafuma is still getting updates and still going as hardcore as far as nudity as possible, and actual intercourse being shown. But yeah, Tinkafuma I think updates with more content than Memento Mori does, and is much easier to play free to play than Memento Mori, where you're going to just miss out on things in Memento Mori if you don't pay some amount of money, and I'm not willing to do that. Anyways, we were covering the video game news and I'm rambling. Inherently, this was what I was afraid of by just starting with video game news, is that I would not really be in the mindset to stay on task. Maybe I'm never really 100% in the mindset to stay on task. Maybe I am just a little too ADHD in general, but that's what me playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Was supposed to fix in my mind, was that I would just have a warm-up. But so far this hasn't worked terribly. Just jumping into the news. The next question I would ask myself certainly is, can I make YouTube Shorts and have my automated system going while I'm playing Yu-Gi-Oh? I probably can, and even if I couldn't, I could launch it on my phone or my Steam Deck and play it there. But I'm not quite ready to fully give up on Yu-Gi-Oh, although I've given up on Yu-Gi-Oh quite a bit. Sorry. I decided to brush my teeth while I was taking a break, and now the baking soda is burning the back of my mouth. I think I swallow toothpaste when you're not supposed to, despite my best efforts to not do that. We had already seen this story, the Crash Bandicoot artist claiming that a 5th game was cancelled. For the Crash Bandicoot series, I never really could get into them. As a character, I'd like to see Crash Bandicoot see some kind of revival, but I think he just needs to be in a completely different type of game. I think his initial influence of let's make a Sonic game, but let's make it at a 3D perspective with the camera behind us running towards the background, I think that is flawed. And so if Crash Bandicoot was revitalized and was in more of a traditional side-scrolling game like a Super Mario Brothers game, maybe that would work. If he was in a 3D platformer, almost certainly that would work. Like, he could be the new Collectathon mascot character. Although, if PlayStation was going to have a mascot, it's definitely going to be Astrobot nowadays, not Crash Bandicoot. And Crash Bandicoot was never really directly owned by PlayStation, and I think that was part of the problem. Had Sony Interactive Entertainment owned all the rights to Crash Bandicoot, we almost certainly would have seen more Crash Bandicoot games, with a new one with every new console, almost certainly. The Microsoft, I suppose, could use a kid's mascot, so Microsoft just wanted to acquire the company that owns Crash Bandicoot. I could see them doing that, but I don't think they would do that. They might acquire the company, but I don't think they'd make new Crash kid-friendly games. Now, I don't know what else you'd do with him other than make him be in a side-scrolling game of some sort, or a 3D platforming game of some sort that is fairly kid-friendly. And at a certain point, maybe Jak and Daxter already fill that need as much as that need needs to be filled. Concord's beta weekend has been extended. PlayStation has extended the Concord early access weekend until later today. That's not very relevant news in the future. And then apparently first Bioshock 4 images have reportedly appeared online. MP1ST. For all we know, this might be the very beginning of the game. Or the very ending of the game, if that is part of even Bioshock 4. It would be kind of crazy if they just made a new game and called it Bioshock and it had no connection or no feel to any of the other Bioshocks. It is also kind of crazy that nobody else tried the roaming boss concept except for Bioshock games. In the same way, like Horizon arguably has roaming bosses in a big open world. Monster Hunter has roaming bosses in a big open world. The difference there is that in Bioshock you are in buildings and small environments, so it is very tight-knit combat, and there's just not that many tight-knit combat games out there. Dead Space arguably could have used a big roaming boss in its reboot that would just appear at times. A lot of the intrigue around Bioshock has really fallen to the wayside with history. There is considerably less interest in the big daddies, considerably less interest in the little sisters. Not really any interest in the main protagonist from Bioshock 1, 2, or 3. Or 3 being called Infinite. Then we talked about Disney reportedly losing a terabyte of data, being hacked. They're showing a screenshot of the Epic Mickey 1. I assume this is the remaster. I don't think it's out quite yet, but it'll be out pretty soon, I think. But yeah, the remaster of Epic Mickey 1 may lead to a remaster of Epic Mickey 2, but I doubt it will lead to an Epic Mickey 3. And that is the shame, I guess, in general we have had with remasters, in that none of the remasters have really led to reboots of the series as much as I would have liked it. Some of them have. Certainly the God of War remaster reboot led to a reboot, but holding it to a strict rule that a game would have had to have been remastered and then fairly quickly a reboot would have had to have been announced. I'm not sure that any game actually has that scenario. The closest that comes to mind would be Resident Evil 4, in that Resident Evil 4 has had multiple remasters, and eventually that did lead to a reboot in Resident Evil 2 remake, Resident Evil 1 remaster. I guess technically may have led to the Resident Evil 2 reboot remake. But then if you use Resident Evil as the example, that whole history is a mess, because inherently you could also argue that the many remasters of Resident Evil 4 kept the series alive past the bad Resident Evil 5 and 6 reception, to the point where you could get to a soft reboot in Resident Evil 7. Yeah. So, yeah. Inherently, I think even this year compared to last, reboots are becoming less common as far as being announced, in that so many companies are just trying to downscale and lay off people. They are not being ambitious as far as announcing new games or trying to craft new games. At least publicly, they're not doing that, in favor of just trying to make more profits for the shareholders. Aliens Fireteam Elite information has seemingly appeared online. The game looks to be planned for 2025. And then Phoenix Lab devs reveal a now scrapped Project Dragon game, which again seems fairly pointless to. I mean, I guess it has some small historical relevance to see a game that's been scrapped, but for most gamers, teasing a player with a unfinished game information is kind of pointless. I don't watch a lot of Scott DeWaz on YouTube, but his latest video was all about games that had the same name but were completely different. And sure, I knew about like Aladdin for the Sega Genesis versus Aladdin for the NES versus Aladdin for the Super NES. I'm not sure there was an Aladdin for the NES actually, but there was about 8, it seems like, different Aladdins that were made by different companies and played differently. But then he went down a much more exhaustive list of games. Like, apparently somebody made a 2D platformer called Pong for the Atari years after Pong, the original video game, had been released and made. And yeah, we know Prey, the original Prey and then the most recent Prey are completely different games, which that was silly. Seemed like a way to irritate people and lose a fan base, potentially, just to save potentially a few bucks on finding out if you could find a new name for a game and a copyright and all the lawyer fees around that to trademark and copyright a title. Inherently, Scott DeWaz implied that that wasn't even the reason, but that's the reason I had always heard that the new Prey was called Prey, is that they already owned the rights to the name, so it would save them lawyer fees and copyright fees. But Scott DeWaz said that they were feeling pressure to make any announcement around Prey as a remake of the original Prey. But yeah, I definitely say check out this video, as it is an interesting look at just how many different games have the same names. Most of the names are fairly generic, and inherently, if they credited more people, you would have games that just had the title of the main producer, main developer, or the title of the company. So Atari's Pong versus Gottlieb's Pong would be an example, or Nintendo's Pong versus Sega's Pong. And usually you can just label things with parentheses to know which one you're talking about. It hasn't led to any real major confusion. Very rarely are you talking about the new Prey game and the old Prey game in the same conversation, where that would be necessary. But it is part of a feeling I have as somebody who looks at all the games that come out on Steam, that we are going to hit a point where it's going to be very, very difficult to make a game that has a unique name on Steam. And particularly since Steam Direct allows so many people to make name confusion listings where they are actively trying to make their games sound somewhat similar or even have the same name as better games that sell better. Which that is definitely another argument for curation and stopping so many bad games from staying on Steam. But yeah, in general, I think it still will be a case where anybody could name their game almost anything. You could make a third game called Prey right now. If Hulu wanted to take their Predator prequel movie, Prey, and make a video game out called Prey on that, that would work fine. People would figure it out. Now, on the other hand, video games have that backup option too of just being serialized, so you can have Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 all the way up to 15, and if you want a subtitle under any of those Final Fantasy games, you can add it. Okay, so this should, at this point, be just all new games coming out on Steam. This one's already on the fall list, so I assume I've already made a YouTube short on it. And this was from the 12th, so that kind of does make sense. When I run my macro to make YouTube shorts, I'm also recognizing that that breaks fairly frequently, in that there is something about just certain pages. What that implies to me, probably, is that maybe some pages are getting saved to the hard drive and put to sleep. And maybe that's the issue. Maybe Firefox did something new. So there was a 3D version of this game. I think that was just called Dark Deception. Now we're seeing a super version of it, as in the Super NES version of it. And honestly, I think this version of the game might be a little bit more playable. Dark Deception in itself, though, is not a game that ever really caught my attention perfectly. It felt like it was half a meme game, but it was very positive. But I obviously put it on the wish list. I just don't know if there was a real game to play here, or whether this is just something that a bunch of streamers made popular. But even if streamers did make it popular, it is also probably worth pointing out that that's not happening as much these days, thank goodness. It's a lot of DLC here. And then weirdly, we saw all the DLC that this list is from Glowstick Entertainment that they're highlighting, and then here we can see the comparison according to the YouTube algorithm, the Steam algorithm, as to which games are closest to Dark Deception. So apparently this Souls of Kronos anime looks like a positional placement role-playing game, strategy RPG. You're saying that is similar to Dark Deception. Most of these games aren't even horror games. Most of these games aren't even 3D. So even basic tags seem to be getting ignored by the Steam algorithm. Apparently this is very difficult. The Super Dark Deception is, to the point where people are getting upset with it. Give Time Circuit a chance. Oh yeah, and then last episode I thought I was logged out and I couldn't put games on the follow list, and I installed the Windows update and the computer reset, and then it's working again. So yeah, something weird is going on. Here we have yet another clicker. Thought maybe we would have started to see less of those. Hopefully we have. Deadly and Danger. Go back here. Danger and Deadlier is a name confusion for Dark and Darker. There. Game. And notice that these two are getting recommended. Probably because this game specifically chose the exact same tags that this game had. Then weirdly, the comparisons here are very much higher. So it definitely seems like the Steam algorithm gives different weight to different tags, and so if you use one tag, you are potentially setting yourself up to be compared very differently than if you hadn't used that one tag. Alright, I'll give this a chance. I imagine Orange is yet another clicker game. Well, whatever it is, it's not good enough. Still are seeing a pretty large amount of garbage games, to the point where I think I'm potentially being too generous to things that even look like they might be slightly good. I'm also seeing a lot of these survival games with these very generic heads-up displays, which, yeah, you just cannot release a game with a heads-up display that looks like this. First of all, having 4 meters is too much anyways, but whenever I see this, I immediately dismiss the game. So it looks like this might be a good horror game. I might have given this a chance if it looked more like it was an actual game. I have no idea what this is. Some kind of deck building game. Give it a chance. There's a game called Intravenous, I believe, that's on Steam right now for 100% off. Probably because Intravenous 2 likely just launched. Here's yet another clicker. And yeah, at the moment, without putting any more thought into it, I'm willing to just click and add games to my collection. Farm Debt Replay Life. Yeah, I think that's going to be a no just because of the title. I'll give My Last Stand Survivors a chance. Give this a chance. Here. Looks like a Pac-Man / Bomberman clone. mixing both Pac-Man and Bomberman visuals, I guess. I'm gonna say no. Well, the concept actually does kind of deserve some consideration. Here's our first non-fruit clicker clone. Somebody needs to be looking at these games, though, before they get on the Steam store. The easiest thing would be to simply block clickers. That would solve everything. Some kind of new Sudoku. Well, it would solve everything for a while at least. Yeah. I heard someone talking about the thought of making Steam machines, bringing them back, and how that would potentially cost Valve and Steam a lot of money. They have the money to do it, one would assume, but yeah, they may not really benefit from doing something like that. I suppose if we knew that Valve was working on something like a new Steam machine, something more powerful to be the bigger brother to the Steam Deck, I could perhaps excuse the vast amount of garbage games that they're listing onto the storefront to get that $100 of Steam Direct things. Although, in fairness, I'd still kind of prefer that Steam just charge $200 to list a game on Steam Direct and see if that eliminates half of the garbage low effort games. Like, just raise the price. Yeah. $500 would be more than reasonable to list a game to show that you're really trying to be a business. And yes, that's inherently unfair to countries like Brazil or Peru or Africa or Russia, and where $500 is just a lot harder to come by, but that is capitalism. Capitalism has always been unfair. This is a Darkest Dungeon parody. I would call it more than a clone. So I'm gonna give it a chance, even though it probably is nothing. Sky jumping. Another up clone. We have a real-time strategy game. I'm actually a little surprised there aren't more real-time strategy games. And it's really hard to justify some of these older looking 2D platforms. Here we have this. Screenshots are mostly just black screens with text. That's gonna be a no. Mutant fish creatures. Might be something. There is a theme growing with more fishing fish creature type games. I suppose at some point, if I became really successful on YouTube, I might go back and no, it wouldn't make any sense to delete YouTube Shorts based on how many views or how many comments were on it. That's what I was about to say, but it kind of destroys the whole concept of having the YouTube Shorts be there. It it's much more important that if somebody ever in 100 years in the future searches the name of that game, that they see my YouTube short or have a chance of seeing my YouTube short, than it is to spend the extra energy to delete a underperforming YouTube short, which does nothing. Particularly, I feel like shoveling out YouTube shorts does not hurt the odds of your YouTube shorts being shown to people anywhere as much as having even one bad video on YouTube hurts the chances of the next video being promoted. Now, I don't think there's any confirmation that deleting a bad underperforming video helps in any way, so can't really recommend deleting videos. And then inherently, every time I've heard of any YouTube content creator talk about deleting content, they say they regretted it in the end. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can see kind of privating here. Now, for a parody of the banana clicker game, but here at least is kind of a silly twist on it. That being said, there was already a game called Cock that was just a rooster chicken to click on, and this is another example of a word that should just raise a red flag and not let the game be approved. Or at least, at the very least, you might need to put something like this into the adult section of Steam, just because every single screenshot is of a cartoony butt. Crust is probably nothing. Something being on the curator feed doesn't mean anything. Also, so can't really take anything from that. There's just a much higher level of polish here on the visuals I'm seeing here. This one, Fallen Leaf, has got me excited as a potential game. Where I spent ball bounce is about the worst. Seeing a lot of pixely games. Now weirdly, we're not seeing any fighting games. So it doesn't seem like game developers have a heads up as far as what the next fest is. I think it gets announced to everybody at the same time, which certainly it's not really enough time that you could have made a whole new fighting game. Okay, so here we are, I guess, at the end of the show. This XYZ cup. Don't think we can. Can't play this deck. Let's see. Do we have anything labeled XYZ? Nope. So I'd have to make a new XYZ deck to enter this. And this is coming tomorrow. So we're exactly under 2 hours, including taking a bathroom break, before I start playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Here at the end. And so this is where the experiment would be, to potentially just end the stream here, which I don't think I'm going to do today, just because I want to play one game at least. And I want to also open up all the Matsu articles. Summon that. Did they change how this works? Or am I changing how I'm doing things? I think we may just play one game today, and then I will seek out feedback in a fairly jaded fashion, admittedly, because there are definitely some types of feedback that I just don't care to hear. For instance, if people told me to go back to Yu-Gi-Oh! And only play Yu-Gi-Oh! In the stream and don't cover the news at all, that's not feedback I care to hear or would listen to. But if the feedback said, yes, play Yu-Gi-Oh! At the end, but please play at least an hour of Yu-Gi-Oh! At the end, I'd consider that. Although, inherently, what's going to happen here is as soon as I run out of things to say, I'm just going to go quiet. And then you're just going to have this, like, silent playthrough here. And at any point I could just kind of, like, pause the recording at the end of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And if I was to pause the recording, then I could play forever and it just wouldn't be in the uploaded version of the videos. That would feel a little bit better. And yeah, I guess maybe some other suggestions might be helpful. It is very much a case where I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know how I'd react to suggestions, whether I'd listen to them or whether they'd be helpful. Generally speaking, though, I would say almost all the suggestions I've received so far in 10 years of running a YouTube channel has been helpful, whether I could act on them or not. Inherently, yes, I need better thumbnails, and I need probably better labeling and titles and descriptions and all of that too, but I don't have the ability to make thumbnails, and I don't know what to change on the titling and labeling. So yeah, going over my Twitter feed, apparently a pre-release build of Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 has leaked. It isn't scheduled for release until September, so even if you got this pre-release build, it's not really going to be the final experience, so I don't know why you would spoil a game for yourself by seeking out the pre-release build, unless you're just doing it for historical collection reasons. Which, in fairness, we don't have a lot of that going on. Nobody has early beta builds of almost all games that came out in the 80s and 90s and even the like 2000s. Okay. Let's see what we can do here for a one-turn kill. Move is to see what are they willing to stop and what are they going to try and prevent. That feels like a new animation too. And very quickly, I'm going quiet here. Apparently Scald Against the Black Priory is an old school CRPG with modern sensibilities. This visual style is very demanding though for modern games. Inherently this is also going to be a problem if you were to try to play a lot of those old PC DOS games too, is that a lot of them are going to be at this resolution and this level of quality. And so even if they played very nicely, there is just a high level of chance that it's not going to feel like a modern game or feel like something you really want to spend your time on. Of course, that was always the case, is the nostalgia is just going to play a major role on whether or not you enjoy. Seriously, bring it back. Okay, well. Could summon this. See how this works. He's doing a lot, but he may not be doing what's needed. We're halfway through the month, but with the XYZ Cup, I could see making a mistake here. And not getting up to platinum. Okay, so trying to attack that doesn't do 1200 damage to it, and it does the damage to you. Okay. Don't think that matters too much, though. And so here's all the Gamatsu headlines we apparently missed. Some of these happened after I started streaming. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 Early Access Multiplayer Beta is set for August 30th to September 4th. Open Beta is for September 6th to the 9th later, which I'm sure people are really happy in the fact that you have to pre-order or do something that costs more money to get early access to betas. Sony Interactive Entertainment has announced its China Joy 2024 lineup. Sony has been recently going more and more into promoting their games in China and partnering with Chinese companies. So there's quite a list here of the China Hero Project games they funded, and first party games, all of which are kind of, I think, older. Astrobot may be totally new. Then they're also highlighting some third-party games. And I'd have to double check here, but with the exception of the China Hero Project, I'm not sure any of those games actually were released in or manufactured or made by any Chinese companies. You know what? Let's just play our trick here and see what happens. Probably should have activated this while that was still on the ground. Like, how could it activate its ability, though? That's the question. Let's see, a PC game called Seed Sow Lullaby launches this winter for Steam. I don't get it. Not only should that story have been opened, this page should have been opened. This week's Japanese game releases. Let's just keep on activating this. We've got one more attempt to clear the field. This week's Japanese game releases: Master Direct Detective Archives, Raincode Plus, Powerful Pro, Baseball 24-25, and more. So, couple more than average games. Usually you see about 5. Not a ton of them big names. From what I can tell, Powerful Pro Baseball is big, and Master Detective Raincode Plus sounds like it's probably just Raincode with DLC included. And yep, fairly long list here of digital games. The Amazon Prime Day sales don't feel like they really affect the release schedule of games in any way. And honestly, I haven't seen any video games really on sale there. In fact, you're probably better off buying video games from Target, because they have a buy 3 for the price of 2 sale going on, I think, still. It does make a lot of sense, frankly, to spread apart where money is spent so we don't create huge monopolies where Amazon is only possibly competing against Walmart, maybe. Speaking of retail companies, there's a YouTuber, I think it's called Retail Archaeology, where it's somebody who probably doesn't know that much, but he goes into stores and films just what is going on with those stores, as far as, are there things on the shelf, how dusty and dirty are the shelves, does it look like this is a business that is on its way out, or is this a business that is thriving? And so specifically, his latest video is about the death of physical media, and so he went to like Best Buy and showed how many things at Best Buy are on the shelves, how many movies and things like that. And surprisingly, in the Walmart that he went in to finish my story, there was actually a decent selection of video games on Walmart. Although he did mention something I hadn't heard, that Walmart seems like they're saying they're going to get rid of Xbox games specifically from being on their shelves, because his thought was that Walmart was mad at them for them selling digital-only versions of the Xbox, whereas the Nintendo Switch doesn't have a digital-only version, and the PlayStation does have a digital-only version, so I don't know why there's an exception there. But yeah, the Walmart seemed like it had more movies. It is damning, certainly with faint praise. It's not like a library by any means when you walk into a Target or a Walmart, even a well-shelved, well-stocked Target or Walmart. Target's shelves were very bare as far as video games and movies, and Target, I think he said, had already announced that they were only going to hold on and sell a small collection of like the newest of movies. Which, you know, it does kind of make sense. A lot of supermarket stores would be better off if they just converted a lot of their shelves into storage, and they were just holding larger items like furniture and things in storage for online purchases. And frankly, a lot of stores would be better off if they shut down completely and turned into more helpful things like grocery stores, or maybe schools or daycares, if you could convert a supermarket store into one of those, which you probably couldn't, because there's not enough bathrooms, not enough good constructions to do things like that. I think that there has always been way too many supermarket stores overall, but then there also are a lot of deserts where purchasing the things you need, particularly food deserts happen quite a bit. I think Kroger and Albertsons are trying to merge, and in that plan they're going to create a duopoly with like Walmart, or as far as grocery stores, and shut down a bunch of grocery stores, which won't be good for people, and it will eliminate choice and competition. Not that I really believe competition has ever really lowered the price of anything. But yeah, to get back to video games, digital video games I think will become the domain specifically of online and GameStop. That's the other thing, is that pretty much at any point, as long as GameStop's still around, that you still are going to be able to go and buy older games, used at least, and newer games new. Although you might start to see GameStops be part of Walmart's and Target's, and there'll just be a GameStop section inside of those stores. This is not going to work until I have something that can actually attack. This is terrible. I thought this was going to be a short game, and it never is a short game, is it? We still have 3 Gematsu headlines here. Non-RIP, 9 RIP launches October 15th in the West. This looks to me to be an otome visual novel, if I was to guess. Yeah, I'm not sure it's actually coming to Steam though. No, it's only coming to the Switch. Interesting. And then Sparks the Electric Gesture 3 for the Switch launches July 25th in the Americas and then August 1st worldwide. This is another Switch exclusive. And then a game called Shoulders of Giants is coming to the PS5 and Steam on August 12th alongside an Ultimate update. Let's see what that looks like on Steam. So as soon as these screenshots want to load. Well, it's not particularly impressive, but I'll make a YouTube short on it. And with that, I am done. As far as all the news, I can go back to Twitter and see if any new news has happened in the last couple of minutes, but I imagine it hasn't. One thing I am noticing here is that my level of interest in playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to be very limited down to just playing like one game on screen. So, yeah. The thing is, it's almost certainly going to be that my interest in playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just going to end with a whimper. I'm just going to eventually convince myself to stop playing it. It's not going to be like Magic the Gathering where I got banned for cheating when I wasn't cheating, and then I couldn't play Magic the Gathering Arena when I needed to stream, which ruined an entire stream. Seriously, just give me one character. That one character may not be good enough. I definitely do think in this experiment we could get these streams down to 2 hours on a short day. Probably still going to be closer to 3 hours on a long day if there's just a lot of news. Destroy all other monsters on the field. Finally. Hopefully this works. Otherwise I'm just gonna surrender. No. I didn't want to do that. Wanted to discard that. That was really stupid. It'd be 28 more turns until this guy ran out of cards. And I could have won that way. He's not moving slow enough that I think he would disconnect due to it, or lose due to a time limit. If I surrender here, I won't get any of the progress I've just put in. And I'm playing ranked. I'm not sure I talked about it. I heard about one game where the penalty if your network disconnect was severely harsh, and the servers were so bad that the players were getting disconnected because of the game developer servers being bad, and then being penalized in such a way that they couldn't actually play the game ever. And yeah, you would have to be fairly silly, though, I would say, to stay in a game matchmaking queue for more than an hour and not just be so frustrated that you would, at that point, demand the instant refund. This is still not helping me. It's like I put all of the cards, or I put a lot of cards in the graveyard and it banished a bunch of cards. I guess I might be getting daily quests done, at the very least. I don't know what this player's strategy is, other than irritating me. It doesn't seem to be successfully doing any damage to me, despite the fact that I've not even had anything to defend myself with for the past 2 turns. Well, by all means, give me a 3,000 attack. Oh, I see what he's gonna do. Oh man, if I had not put this face down, I could have activated that and potentially won. Send this card back to my hand without knowing what it is. So I think he can just attack here and do 3,000 damage to me, and attack here and do 3,000 damage to me. It's even worse than that. Well, that's a typical example of a bad experience playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And we do all these things and still don't get a lot of reward for it, even though we put a lot of time into playing that level. And yeah, I guess that mostly has gotten most of the daily quests done, so we don't have to worry too much about that. And I'm still slightly concerned about the dual pass. I bet we don't have any of these. Oh, why do we have 5 XYZ Cup reward tickets already? That doesn't make any sense. Is this from the last XYZ Cup? Apparently so. Well, that's the only thing I could guess as to why I had it already. Jinzo being shown there. Jinzo's a weird looking character, for as often as he was shown. Alright, well, with that one game, we will end this stream at just about 2.5 hours. And so if I was to play another game, there is a decent chance it would take another half an hour. So yeah, this has been an interesting experiment. Do the news early at front, and then maybe do Yu-Gi-Oh! At the end. Probably not do Yu-Gi-Oh! At the end. This feels like something I could get used to. So I now will look for feedback to see if anybody watched this stream. A lot of that may have to do with just the day and time that the stream came out, and just to see if there was any comments about this slightly different format. Anyways, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.